I actually don't know where to begin. This is my forever trouble, any of talk. So, but I want to begin somewhere that I am most comfortable. One thing that I notice, particularly at this point, is that these times are extremely challenging. And we have many questions parading before us. They all force us to seek some urgent responses. And not any response squarely meets the demands of our mind and heart. We are all trying to find a new idiom to our pain, the pain related to our own identity and our own interactions with the larger community. This book, which I am going to introduce in a while, came out of such a pain of being and belonging. As I start working on this talk, I read a statement from the American Academy of Religion that says, in moments like these, we uphold the importance of scholarly inquiry. We call for freedom of information and caution against the dangers of too easily spread disinformation. We strive to promote free inquiry and critical examination for all scholars and to create space for listening to those who have historically been ignored, exploited, and silenced. The quote ends. With a similar idea of scholarly inquiry, I will now introduce my book, Remaking History, 1948 Police Action and the Muslims of Hyderabad. This event of 1948 in Hyderabad was buried under heavy disinformation. And the subsequent lack of empathy for the silence, exploit, and ignored voices. Those voices still remain feeble and smaller even after several decades. The book is almost 350 pages, and it is not possible here to sum up everything from the book. Also, I'm not a big fan of providing summaries. Rather, I'll just focus on a major argument from the book, the politics of mainstream history and the making of alternative histories. I will show how ordinary people, I'm going to use the category for my talk, ordinary people perceive or interpret history. How various versions of history would be produced and circulated through different times, places, and communities. Before getting into the actual story of the new book, I just want to promote my old book a little bit. Not just as a sales strategy, but only to give you a sense of the direction of my work and mission. By the way, this book came out of my graduate studies here at UW-Madison. And then that's a good reason to go back to this book as well. So for the last 2 decades, I have been trying to capture several aspects of local Islam in my research and teaching. Theoretically, we can still call this Islamicate or Persianate, with my focus being more on vernacular languages and cultures as experienced in the South Indian languages of Telugu and Deccani Urdu. In 2013 publication, The Festival of Peace, means the Festival of Saints, I started speaking about the idea of local Islam and its multiple manifestations based on the historical background of Hyderabad, when the Prophet's grandson and his followers were martyred. I tried to show how that entire history travels to South India and how the 7th century battle, historical aspects of Islam were being translated into a local idiom of public and religious narratives. This 2013 publication tried to bring some evidence to talk about the trajectory of local Islam, everyday Muslim life, and Hindu-Muslim interactions. Note that it was also about a historical event. And my story was about how that history metamorphoses into a local story. It was in 2006. I was still conducting field research. For this world publication, I ran into a Muslim farmer, Abdul Qudus Sahib, who was then almost 78 years old. While I was completely focusing on oral narratives related to the Battle of Karbala, many times he kept taking a detour to talk about the violence of the police action. The students who were learning these oral songs from him were literally patient and asked him repeatedly to focus just on that religious event and Karbala. Then Qudus Sahib responded, quote begins, "You people don't know anything about that happened in our immediate past, and you're endlessly fascinated by some remote past. Try to understand the immediate past, the very yesterday of our history." Quote ends. To continue with Qudus Sahib, so this is a picture from this public religious procession during the Muharram in South India. He said, "The police action was an end of many good things in our lives. We lost not only many friends, our personal careers, houses, and most importantly, the beautiful light, ihsan, and the tehzeeb culture of our everyday life. If someone says it's just about a few Muslims, no, not at all. It's a pain about the entire community of Delhi, Hyderabad, and Telangana." So since then, my mind was wandering in two worlds: the Battle of Karbala from the 7th century, Iraq, and the police action of 1948, Hyderabad. Two different locations, two different histories, actors, agents, and the factors of these events. The story of the police action begins on August 15th, 1947, the Independence Day of India, when the borders of India and Pakistan were filled with the blood of thousands of people, while the new nation states of India and Pakistan were negotiating land and power. The citizens of the princely state of Hyderabad experienced the unraveling of an intense political conflict between the Union government of India and the local ruler of Hyderabad. In the process of integrating the Hyderabad state, the government of India initiated a military invasion, codenamed as the Operation Polo, but locally popular as the police action. So that is the term I was using. Actually, it was a military invasion, politically speaking. Between September 13th and 17th of 1948, these dates are very important. September 13th and 17th, the entire state was occupied by the Indian military, killing thousands of people and displacing some thousands. According to Qudus Sahib, the blood had no religion. It is of Muslims, Hindus, and Christians, the quote ends. So that was the military in the streets of the Hyderabad. And then, according to the Sundarlal Commission, which was officially appointed by the Indian government, it was estimated that nearly 27,000 to 40,000 Muslims were killed, and some thousands migrated to the other parts of the world, including Pakistan and the USA. The entire report was classified by the government, considering it as a national security issue. This report was not available until 2012, even though there are a wide array of oral narratives, anecdotes, and conversations being circulated in the public. So the entire argument in this book centers on challenging the mainstream history, if there is anything like that. I will just speak about how this challenge works in this book. To give you a sense of this critic, I need to talk a little bit about how ordinary people articulate their expressions of an alternative history. Unlike scholars and pundits, these versions offered by ordinary people, as I show in a while, push the boundaries of a narrative by transforming into more inclusive, diverse, and multi-layered narratives. Like Qudus Sahib, most of the witnesses in their testimonies connect the histories of Karbala and the police action. While there are several ways of producing and circulating this mode of alternative histories, the very mention of the Battle of Karbala in the context of the police action remains intriguing even now. So this was a map provided by the official documents about the military action. So these are the places where the military invasion happened. And then, but other reports, this is one thing I am going to contest in a while. So while the official media and government documents describe this as a happy war, that's an interesting phrase. As if is there anything like happy about war? I don't believe so. Ordinary Hindus and Muslims of the Hyderabad state use the term Uchakota and Khonrezi, meaning massacre and bloodbath. That is the popular terminology. Scholars such as Umar Khalidi use the term Hyderabad Holocaust. So during one of my conversations, people like Qudus Sahib and Jain Malaya, one of the freedom fighters and Urdu literary activist in this region, they compared this event to the Battle of Karbala. But they lamented that, quote begins, at least there was Hussein to fight at that point. There are no Husseins left anymore now, despite all this massacre and bloodshed. Hussein was the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, who fought against the enemies in 7th century. And then they are returning to that moment. So most official documents project an anti-Muslim sentiment. And even the leftist writings, this is a popular image from the leftist activism at the point, Telangana armed struggle between 1946 and 1951. And then that was one of the popular political movements led by leftists. So these stories actually, like, they don't even talk about this violence. And also during the same time, there was in 1956, there was the formation of Telugu linguistic state, the first ever linguistic state in India. So people were busy between 1948 and 56 with this linguistic movement. So none of the historians are like freedom fighters or activists. They spoke about this violence. During my field research between 2006 and 2020, in and around various regions in Telangana, I heard from my interlocutors about the idea of Tarikh Katha. It's a Persian word, but like Teluguized. And then Tarikh means history, Katha means story. So this is like just another version of what we call in modern terms, like Ed and White's idea of historical narrative. But my evidence is coming from ordinary people. This is not the term I'm like using as a scholar. This is a term being used by ordinary people, Tarikh Katha. So from these conversations, I gathered that they use this term, which is a blend of Telugu and Farsi, for what we can call historical story. This term is commonly used by the Telangana folk performers for their storytelling during Muharram. The local performers use this term as a strategy to authenticate their version of the stories, historical stories, rather than official story. So there is a tension between history and fiction, and they are using this kind of terminology. So using similar term in terms of like police action also tells us something about authenticating the same alternative history. In the process of understanding the happenings between September 13th and 18th, another key source was literary fiction. So this is where I am spending a lot of time reading fiction, short stories, novels, autobiographical writings, memoirs, and then personal essays, which became popular around the same time because the print culture and then print media became popular. According to one of my interlocutors, Varalakshmi, who unfortunately died recently, she said, in fact, I felt that the fictional writers of the times were closer to the dark reality of the day than historians or journalists. If you want to understand what was happening in an ordinary person's life in this Elysium or my generation, you should read fiction. So that is where my generation learned about what was happening, and that is where the real history is. So she was emphasizing this term real history by using Urdu term asli tarikh, means real history. So she's basically providing me vocabulary to understand this entire event. So note her emphasis, particularly on this real history. During that conversation, she was actually switching back and forth from Telugu to Urdu in a very natural flow. The speech behavior too shows us how they are in love with Urdu and Muslim cultures even in everyday life. Varalakshmi was not even 17 years old when the police action happened, and she was just got married to Kavirajamurthy, a progressive writer from the late 40s. Kavirajamurthy's Urdu novel, despite his Brahmin identity, Telugu identity, he was writing mostly in Urdu at that point. My Garib Ho, I am the poor, was one of the primary resources in this book. So first written in 1949, which means immediately after the violence, as an immediate response to the police action, this novel portrays many moments of the bloodshed and trauma. But most importantly, this writer created the characters of both Hindu and Muslim political and religious leaders, literally mimicking their public behavior and their speeches during this period. Some speeches were taken verbatim from the actual public figures of the day. So these are the sources I'm depending mostly on. One is like historical documents, both official and unofficial. The second one is like oral histories, which means testimonies of that violence. So this is on par with violence of partition, basically. So, and then literary and personal writings. One thing that I like want to study more is this visual culture, like the painting that shows the violence, and then the downturn in the life of Muslims after the police action. Varalakshmi, in fact, represents a new generation of the reading public that evolved in the aftermath of the police action. This book documents how such new public sphere associations and the reading public were working together between 1948 and 56 in the Hyderabadi literary culture. Despite the violence and trauma, the Hyderabadi community was resilient and produced a new set of discourses, including progressive Islam, gender equality, social justice, and composite culture of Hindu and Muslim identities. These are the things that we are discussing now. after like post 2000 scholarship. But they were there already in Hyderabad, published extensively both print culture and then also oral narratives. They were all talking about this gender equality, progressivism, and then composite cultures. So the book's journey begins with a debate on the rise of a new Muslim. So the term, which again I take from ordinary people. So in Urdu, they use Naya Musulman. So still struggling with the aftermath of the violence, we encounter a new generation of Muslim men and women who engage with the larger networks of Islam and multiple sources of modernity being translated into its Hyderabadi idiom. So this picture was actually taken during that violence when ordinary people were like reading newspapers, and they engaging with the contemporary discourses. So this is outside a coffee, not coffee in Hyderabad means basically chai shop. So chai and then samosa center, and then so they were actually reading newspaper. That's a kind of combination, wonderful combination, the chai and the newspaper. But there are so many other things happening. And then this is the category I am emphasizing in this book. So where I kind of talk about urbanity and then class distinctions that reshaped the new discourse on Muslims. But these sources, they are like not like passive. Again, the visual culture is also important in this context. So they kind of shows the positive side of social activism, and then how ordinary people became the agents of change and resistance. So, but at the same time, there was this voice of pluralism and progressivism running through many discourses, both ordinary and then scholarly debates. So new Muslim, a category that I'm discussing this in this book, is basically like engages with modernity, social reformism, which is actually because like very dominant at that point in like just on South Asian context because of the influence of Aligarh Muslim University and then Western education, and then like modernist poets such as Allama Iqbal and the progressive poets such as Faiz Ahmed Faiz, Ali Sadar Jafri. So this discourse became very powerful. And then most of these people that I just mentioned, they were also engaging with Hyderabadi Muslims. So, and then on the other hand, this is not just a local story. This is a combination of local and global exchanges. So you see this point of tension where you see global Muslim networks and then local Muslim networks in dialogue with each other. Okay, don't worry about this billboard. This is one of the billboards that I hate in my city. I actually don't buy that terminology as well, that terminology about masculinity and all this stuff. But this is actually one of the famous cigarettes from Charminar. This is the icon of Hyderabad. So the cigarette was called named after this icon. And then this is at that point, I never tried this. You guys might have tried it. You should try this when you go back to Hyderabad at some point. It is so strong. So I don't know what kind of tobacco they were using at that point. So, but this shows, this is very popular billboard, by the way. And then this Charminar factory actually like the face, public face of industrial life at that point. And the rise of also against this like industrialization, there is the rise of working class. And then along with that, we have leftist politics. So fighting against this industrial shift. So this new working class, actually along with the previous like middle and lower middle class Muslims, and then we see this rise of working class, and then also trade union movement at that point. And then that also led to the rise of the new generation of angry young men. So all the people who were in 20s, they were actually talking about all this like industrial revolution, working class, the distinctions between haves and have-nots. But the most important thing that happened during this point was this like rise of print culture. Because there were a lot of newspapers, magazines, and then political associations. So one of the popular associations was the formation of a reading group. So for which one personality, like they were arrested at that point because they were establishing these reading clubs. And then they started reading progressive writing. So this is, in many ways, it is a deliberate choice here. Like ordinary people, they made a choice, open choice, voluntary choice to engage with all these progressive discourses. And then, of course, historically speaking, the establishment of the Osmania University, which was initially like Urdu University, the first ever vernacular university in India. So that actually kind of generated a new group of scholars working on different kind of materials, history, politics, and then cultural studies. So this book actually like shows how these changes shaped this new community of Muslims and Hindus by introducing to these new ideas, starting with the class conflict, and then proletariat, and then particularly the change that I want to show in the book was like about the Ashrafi Muslims, like upper class, middle class Muslims, who for the first time they came out of their inner courtyards, what we call janana in Urdu, and then even women. So that is one thing that the gender discourse kind of became very popular at that point. And then my focus is basically like how these women, they also define themselves as new women, like breaking the traditions and then establishing new gender discourses with a focus on equality and then civil rights. So actually, my evidence, like oral histories, I kind of documented 150 stories, witness stories. Unfortunately, during COVID, we lost 90 people. So this book is in a way, the last document of those witnesses. So this pain of Muslim being and belonging runs through the narrative of this book. So to get to the cause of these debates of history, memory, and contemporary politics, now I try to connect it to what is happening in contemporary setting, particularly in this context. So like connecting past with the present, because Muslim past now at this point is considered to be like a prohibited area. So it's like there's no mention about Muslim past in any textbooks in India. So there is a deliberate erasure of this Muslim past. So my effort is to retrieve that Muslim past and then open up that space, narrative space, where not just about Muslims, it's all like a lot of discourses are about Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and then other minorities. So they were talking about all these issues. Then like I tried to open up that space and then show that, yeah, this is not a static sphere. It's a dynamic sphere, right? So when you think about Muslims, like Muslim discourses, we always say, oh, this is very static. They don't change. They live in medieval times. It's kind of portrayal. So I tried to challenge the portrayal. No, that is not how we should define this community. This is a very dynamic community, engaging with local, global networks at the same time. So I basically wanted to like show all these aspects. And then in 1998, so this is the picture that actually made me like go back to this violence. And then this is one of my favorite lines from my favorite poet, the Kashmiri poet, Aga Shahid Ali. My memory keeps getting in the way of our history. So this is the official history that rejects the participation of minorities and then marginalized communities. As I said in the beginning, they were totally silenced. There's a violence of archives here. So I actually wanted to challenge that position. And then I want to depend on memory. Like what kind of memory, public memory was working when people were talking about this violence. So, and then this 1998, so when I read this poem by Aga Shahid Ali in 1998, it immediately resonated to the restless chambers of my mind and heart. In Hyderabad, on 17th September of that same year, I had witnessed a public rally of the right-wing Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, and had listened to India's then Home Minister Lal Krishna Advani giving a provocative speech, invoking anti-Muslim sentiment in Hyderabad and Telangana state. Advani declared that September 17th, when the Muslims were killed, that should be celebrated as the Liberation Day. So that conveniently pushing back that entire violence into the remote past. And then that charged declaration showed 100% me about the history of my region, my hometown. A history which is already replete with intense memories of Muslim killings, and then also the discourses between 1930s and 50s. On that September day, which marked the 50th anniversary of the integration of the Hyderabad princely state into the Indian government, the Bharatiya Janata Party was jubilant, celebrating the event, conveniently ignoring all the massacre. But could we call it a celebration? Given the violent history that led to the killings of thousands of people, both Hindus and Muslims, and to the global displacement and migration of thousands of Hyderabadis to other parts of US, actually Chicago, Texas. They have a lot of this Hyderabadi diaspora. Since the demolition of the Babri Mosque in 1992, Advani had already been part of my heightened consciousness of the local Muslims. During this period, wherever I went, I heard resounding critics of Advani's statements. However, September 17, 1998 was different. Like many young Muslims of the 1990s, I too had grown up with anti-Muslim slogans buzzing around me. Among them, Muslim ke do histan, Kabristan or Pakistan. A Muslim has only two places to go, either graveyard or Pakistan. And had been called names such as Babar ke Aulad, the children of Babur, the Mughal emperor, and then Aurangzeb Varas, the heirs of Aurangzeb, another Mughal emperor, often remembered for his policies on anti-Hindus and Islamic fundamentalism, and jihadists. This is the most popular, even my writings in Telugu. Because lack of vocabulary, they want to give me a name and then they labeled me jihadi. So graffiti and G's constantly reminded me that my mulk, home country, is somewhere in Pakistan. Actually, I never visited Pakistan in my life. So many writings and oral accounts from Hyderabad and Telangana emphasize that the 1948 police action was nothing but an extension of the partition. Such sentiments once again started playing a central role in the making of a new Muslim identity around 1992, the beginnings of Hindu nationalism. In such a political environment, how does one comprehend the consciousness of the new generation Muslims? Can we gauge it merely through the lens of their faith, or by identifying their sense of being and belonging with some foreign citizenship? In talking to various groups of both Hindus and Muslims in different parts of Hyderabad and then Telangana, I had multiple responses to this question. But the most important things, as I noticed in this book, they come from this statement. This is a statement from one writer who basically wrote in Telugu, but focused more on Muslim life in Hyderabad. He said to me, I am old Hyderabadi to the core. I grew up being half Muslim and half Hindu, while I should say I have more of the 40s old Muslimness in my personality. So that's a statement coming from this writer. So I tried to argue that throughout these narratives, such a paradigm of cultural heritage runs through all the stories. And then there are so many things happened until between 1998 and 2021, because I don't have much time. I want to leave time for more questions and answers. But actually, I delayed this book. I started writing this book 15 years back. And then it took me a lot of time. And then because I had hard time digesting this reality. And then I was undergoing this trauma at the same time, because my family too suffered that violence and trauma. And then I was having these connecting problems with family histories community history and then regional history. So that actually delayed my work. And then when I finally started writing and then trying to finish the book, not finish, just about to transcribe and translate the witness narratives, I got a call from my hometown. And then that call says, Anna Qutuz Sahib is no more. So you remember, I started the presentation with this folk performer, Qutuz Sahib. He was 78 years old at that point. And then this was quite shocking for me. I couldn't touch most of the stories on my voice recorder, the songs he sang, the stories he shared with me, they were all here. I had really had hard time listening to him. And then how could we lose this kind of wonderful personality? And then this guy who called me from my hometown, he said, but there is only one thing that you could do at this point, Anna, brother, just finish writing the book. That will be a apt tribute to that wonderful performer. But I finished the book, but it's 10 years delayed, almost a decade. So I feel so bad because I couldn't show the copy to him. And then I couldn't share anything about this work with him. So it's kind of painful to narrate the story of this book. And then my own family, because we lost most of them during the COVID. And then, as I told you already, like after 150 testimonies, we lost 90 people. And then whenever I go back to my hometown, I kind of like stuck there forever. Their memories, thinking about them, their past, and then the politics around this Muslim sense of being and belonging. Of course, that is where I want to stop right now.